Vasquez, and hello to whoever's viewing this video. So, for my final exam project, I recorded because something came up. So, my choice of topic is my favorite place in the world, thus the world, well, the globe. My favorite place in the world is El Salvador, and I'm going to tell you why. But before that, are fast facts. I have to give you some fast facts about El Salvador just so we get into it slightly, So, we are located in Central America. We are probably probably is not the word. We are smaller than the state of Massachusetts. We are so small that we are the only Central America country that doesn't border, not even border, I don't know what's the word. We don't touch the Caribbean Ocean. We don't touch that. Like, we're not even a part of that. We are on the opposite side of Central America. Our official language is Spanish, but in some of the parts of El Salvador, they speak Nahua, which is basically, the tribal languages that are still spoken. Our currency is the US dollar. We are known as the land of volcanoes. And if you look in our flag, we also have volcanoes in the little circle that's on our flag. And yes, we have multiple volcanoes. Volcanoes that if you go to El Salvador, they will give you tours of. And a lot of our natural waters are actually volcano eruptions that cratered, and then by the grace of God were filled by water. So that's one of our volcanoes. So when people talk about El Salvador, the common saying is El Salvador is dangerous. And we were. It was always dangerous back in the day. But that was back then. It's still a conversation that El Salvador is a dangerous place, and it really was. Like, there was so much going on because of the MS-13 and MARA 18 gangs that honestly, you were never really safe. These gangs would rape women, capture young girls, they would murder men and kids, throw their bodies into lakes. They would ambush buses, have people pay a fee. They would throw rocks at buses. They would vandalize facilities. They basically ran the streets, and you obeyed it, because if not, you would die. And in 2015, our homicide rate had actually reached 103, but I'm pretty sure it was probably much higher. They just never found the bodies. And even before 2015, it was probably higher than that, because that's just how bad it was. And in 2022, we actually hit the lowest homicide rate. We started going lower on the charts for the homicide rates in different countries, and around 2022 we were only at 8, which is obviously it's not a great number, but in general it was so much better than what we did before. And a lot of that had to do with Bukele. He ended up building a mega prison in El Salvador, and this prison right now, as far as I know, holds 73,000 gang members and suspected gang members, because he incarcerated all of them. He literally sent our military and our police to the streets and had all these men arrested. And obviously people are like, oh, like, how did he separate these people from other people? Like, did he just arrest all men and all women? No, because the thing about the MS-13 gangs and the MARA 18 gangs, they weren't afraid of getting caught. They never feared anything because they always believed they were superior, that they rule the world. But Bukele, they weren't expecting a Bukele. Bukele came, and, well, he grew up in El Salvador. He knows how bad it was. He's seen how bad it is. And he knew that these people weren't secretive about what they were a part of and what business they were. And these men would get tattoos on their faces, on their backs, on their hands, any part of their body was basically screaming, I'm a part of a gang, I am the, you know? they they weren't afraid. They let everyone know. But when Bukele became president, he's like, I'm rallying all of them up and I'm taking them in because it's what you're supposed to do when you're president. You're supposed to be for the people. And the most surprising thing about this mega prison is they don't have all the same things that the U.S. prison has. These people don't have pillows or blankets. Their food, there's a rumor, but I'm pretty sure it's true. These people don't have a lot of access to food and like showers. They don't go outside because, well, they did what they did, and Bukele wants them to understand what they did. And another thing about food is there was a rumor going around that the only way these people ate is if they had people on the outside sending money on the inside to get them the food. And that's just because Bukele put different rules than the U.S. does against the prison and incarceration system. And going into incarceration, we actually have the highest incarceration rate in the world right now. And yeah. And he referred to this whole action as a war on crime. And that's because anytime people associated El Salvador, it was to crime. That's all we were known for. So, yeah, in the past we were dangerous, but now it's a whole different story. We're safer now, and we're for the people. And, like, going into this, like, I've been going to El Salvador even before Bukele was president. I've been going since I was 2, and around that time it was 2003, 2004, so I was going there when all this stuff was happening. And I didn't really see it, like, I did see, like, buses getting rocks thrown at them, but I never thought anything of it. I did have my mom tell me that we weren't allowed to wear our jewelry on the streets because a man could come up and rip it off your neck and he wouldn't care. He'll drag you with it on because no one would do anything. And then one of my aunts actually told me a story about one of my cousin's dads. He just went missing, and everyone basically said the gangs got him. So all this stuff was happening around me, but I never really focused on it until like now, where it's safe, but like I never really thought about it as unsafe, and I feel like that's because I was from that place. So I shouldn't even say it's because I was from that place, because even the people there were never safe. I just feel like I've never 100% honed in on what was happening. But like now we're good. We're good. We're clean. We're safe. Okay, speaking of Bukele, meet our president. This is Nayib Armando Bukele Ortiz. He is half Palestinian from his dad, and his dad is Islam, and then his mom is Salvadorian. So he is a mixed president. He is not full Salvadorian. He is mixed, which I find amazing because I'm 100% certain El Salvador has so many mixed babies because I'm a mixed baby. I'm Puerto Rican and Salvadorian. So was my brother. So was a lot of my other friends. And that's because Salvadorians tend to mix blood. And I find it perfect that our president is a mix. Anyway, going back to it. He is the 43rd president. And he was indicted. I don't know if that's the word. Inducted into office. Probably not the word either, but we're going with it. Since June 1st of 2019. So he was a mayor to 2 different municipios before he became president. And in El Salvador, we do not call them states or towns. We call them municipios, which is basically like a state or town. It's our state, our town. Your state, town is our municipio. So he was the mayor to Nuevo Cuscatlán, which is actually maybe like 45 minutes from where my family and I grew up. And he served that for 3 years. But then he became mayor of our capital, San Salvador. And then around this time, he was actually kicked out of his political party, the FMLN, which was our second political party. I don't remember the other one, but in El Salvador, we don't go by Republican or Democrat. We have the FMLN and the other one. But then, because he was kicked out of his parties, and it wasn't necessarily like a whole news thing as to why he was kicked out, but like I assume their ideas and his ideas are two different ideas, so there was a disagreement. So he decided he was going to establish his own party, and he did. In 2018, he introduced Nuevas Ideas, NI, as the new political party. My family is associated with this political party, and honestly, I would consider Nuevas Ideas probably the U.S.'s. What would I like compare to? Honestly, I don't think there's a political party in the U.S. that associates with this political party. But obviously, what it stands for is New Ideas, and I genuinely think it was basically a political party created by the people for the people. And I call him the people because he grew up in El Salvador. He saw how bad it was. He saw all the crime. He saw the poverty. He saw the struggle. So he took what he saw and made it into his whole campaign to change it. And he did that. So Nuevas Ideas is a very involved in the community political party, I would say. Like, they really do a lot of rallies. They offer a lot of donations to people. During COVID, they were actually giving out like bags of food to different communities, and I remember this because my grandma was someone who would actually receive these donations from these people that were helping him campaign. And around that COVID time, he actually adopted Bitcoin into the Salvadorian government. Well, not government, just in general into El Salvador. He adopted Bitcoin and he made that investment. And at first, we weren't doing great with it. Like, it wasn't going anywhere. But after a while, people accepting it and learning about it, it became basically a new currency in El Salvador. And we actually used it to get the incentives from the COVID checks. And that's how a lot of people were receiving it. And there's actually like Bitcoin, I call them ATMs. They look like ATMs, but they're not ATMs. They're the Bitcoin thing that look like ATMs. We have a lot of those in El Salvador now. And then he also got involved. I call them allies now, like political affairs. This man reached out to the U.S. and actually had meetings with Donald Trump. Obviously, I don't stand with him, but meeting with the U.S. president as the third world country is something I never saw coming for El Salvador. And he did that. He really flew to the U.S., sat down like multiple times and had conversation with this man, which was incredible for us because this is us getting our country's name out there. And then our newest ally is China. China actually invested in El Salvador and gave us our first library that opened last week, actually. They sent money to have the construction of a library be built in Centro Histórico, which is our center of history. And it's amazing. This is a huge building. This is new architecture. This is new, like, it's new in general. Like, we've never had a library. Like, this is the first of its kind in El Salvador. No one has seen a library or heard of a library until now. And it's gorgeous. This man actually got China involved in El Salvador and got us a building. Incredible. And then another thing he did is this man met with Google. Literally, Google. No one in El Salvador knows what Google is. And Google decided, hey, El Salvador, we're going to put Central American Google headquarters in El Salvador. So now we're getting Google headquarters in El Salvador. We are getting access to new technology for our hospitals, our schools, our internet, everything. And it's because Nayib Bukele said, I'm going to take this step. I'm going to have the conversations. And then he's introduced new architecture, like new roads, new buildings, new housing programs for family. He gave out free iPads to every student during COVID, and they can keep them. It's incredible what this man has done. So yeah, this is our president. I call him the step that we needed, the growth and the change that is El Salvador.
Okay, for some reason this one didn't record. So this one I just kind of talked about the culture of El Salvador, which is basically a mix of Native American and Latin American exposure. And those exposures came from the Maya, Lenca, Pipil, and Cacaporra people. They contributed a lot to a lot of the practices that are still held in El Salvador, like our dances, the music we listen to, the art we create, and a lot of the remedies when it comes to medicine and how we cook is another thing. They also contributed to how we do laundry, which is going to the river and scraping your clothes on a rock and just going back and forth with soap to clean it. And that's very common still. I even do it now because in El Salvador, like, you can buy washers and dryers, but it's a whole system you have to connect that's very different than the piping that is in the US. So my family and I would just grab buckets of clothes and go to the river, smack it on a rock and do some cleaning. And another thing about Salvadoran culture is that we are really inclined to our religions. We are Roman Catholic, and basically you can see that since our country's name is El Salvador, which means the Savior. And then we have a town, or municipio in El Salvador, is called Salvador del Mundo, which means the Savior of the world, which is that picture right there, that statue of God being on top of the globe. That basically shows that we are very inclined to our religion. And another thing, where the library is located and the Centro Histórico is located, is one of the main churches, where our saint, Sant Romeo, is actually buried underneath that church. Not underneath the building, but if you go under the church, like the basement, there is a memorial for him where his tomb is, and you can go and pray there. And then if you go to Suchitoto, which is one of our other historical locations, we have St. Lucia. Her statue is there, and everyone goes and prays to her. But more about our culture is we've been more open to new religions. Like, there is practice of Protestants. We have some Jews coming in. There's just like been a lot more exposure to different religions, but the primary one is Roman Catholic. And going back to what I said about the art, every time you go to vendors for souvenirs, you will see our art is really reflected with bright colors. And it's the way it's done is I don't know what it's called, but I've seen it where it's like a pen that's like hot at the end, and then they can burn it into materials. That's one way a lot of El Salvadorians do their art. There's also a lot of clay working, and a lot of the paintings are actually bright colors and depictions of animals or women with comales on their heads. And when it comes to a lot of the folk art, there's also performances like the woman you see there. They dance in the really ruffled skirts. And there's also another group called the Cachiporras, which here in the US is basically baton twirlers, but in El Salvador, it's not just throwing a stick in the air and catching it. It's a lot more like them dancing to the folk music, which is cumbia. And it's very popular in El Salvador. And hammocks. I put hammocks in there because that's one of the things you can buy on the sides of the streets, or in general. There's a lot of hammock manufacturers where it's women and men doing it by hand, like basically braiding is what I call it, the hammocks to make strong materials. And I put bright colors at the end because I feel like a lot of our art and a lot of our people and a lot of our like traditional clothings are just very bright to represent the vibrancy of El Salvador, and I feel like it represents just how beautiful the country is overall. And I didn't add it there, but at the bottom there's like the head of the cow. That's another popular thing in our culture. It's around Halloween, well, over there's Dia de los Muertos, they do a bull that shoots out fireworks where there's a man under those bull heads. And I don't remember what the significance is, but it's very popular. It's kind of like, I think the idea is to scare away the dead, or the devil is what it's supposed to do. And that was one of the traditions I loved going to see when I was younger. It's very beautiful. Now we just wait in silence because this one didn't record.
food. Oh, when you go to El Salvador, if you ever go to El Salvador, please go to El Salvador. Go with a belly ready to eat. Because when I tell you, from the moment you leave that airport, there are coconuts being sold to you on the side of the street. And you are going to eat them up because I promise you, El Salvador has the juiciest. And the meat inside is so good. Like, oh, it has that crunch and that savor to it. You gotta go. Okay. So the first food we're going to talk about, if you know Salvadorians, pupusas. You know that's like our main thing. That's what we're here to give and to serve. So they're made from either corn or rice flour or dough, basically the same thing. Personally, I would highly recommend the corn. I feel like corn is more common. Rice is alright, but corn, she does it. She gives. And when it comes to this dough, you can either get it filled with cheese, pork, beans, or beans and cheese, or fish, or loroco, or basically anything else they want to shove in there, they can do it. But I am a frijol en queso girl, so I highly recommend that one. And make sure, and when I mean make sure, these are put on the table so you fill your freaking pupusa. When you go, there's gonna be like little jars of like cabbage, carrots, onions, vinegar, and other spices. Put a bunch on top of your pupusa, and then a little jug with like tomato sauce. Put that on there to drench it. That's how you're supposed to eat it. And do not eat it with a fork. We will judge you and we will look at you and we will upcharge you if you try to eat it with a fork. You eat it with your fingers, no matter how hot it is. That is the respectful way to do it. That is how you eat it. Okay. And then, ooh, the camera angle changed. Okay. And then, tamales. This is another thing that El Salvadorians make a lot. So it's basically corn dough again. And then it's laid on a plantain leaf. So this is a plantain leaf. You put a little bit of the corn dough, and then you put whatever your filling is. It can be chicken, pork, basically the same thing as pupusas. Normally, my family does it with beans, like mashed beans. So you spread it, and then you put more of the corn dough, and then you wrap it in the banana leaves, and then you put it into a comal, which is like, I don't know, like, how to describe it. It's like a pot, almost a pot, kind of a pot, kind of not a pot, and you put the comal over a fire or hot rocks, and then you put the tamales inside, and then you cover it. Or you can go the traditional way of heating up rocks, putting a big banana leaf, and then putting all the little wrapped tamales on top, wrapping it in a banana leaf, covering it with another banana leaf, and then putting hot rocks on top. Just cook it a little bit. Yeah. And then another thing is our horchata. Horchata is so good. You have to try it. It's like one of those Salvadorian drinks. You have to try. But I am a person that highly believes you should not get it with milk. You should get it with water. But that's just a preference. But also ask just in case, because I don't know how y'all like it, but the milk one sometimes just does not sit right with a lot of people. But horchata, according to Google, it's made with a bunch of different seeds. But I don't know what seeds are the real ones, because in El Salvador you can just go buy a bag and the lady's like, oh yeah, this is for horchata, and I'm like, okay, cool, and I take it, and then molido, how do you say molido in English? You grind them down into a powder, and then you mix it with water. But don't just throw all the powder and the water together. You gotta like mix it until it becomes like a watery consistency, and then you serve it on ice, chilled. Whew, so good, so good. And then this is another Salvadorian drink that people have to try. I know Salvador's hot, but this is so good. Atol de elote is basically like an oatmeal consistency. It's basically grinded down corn powder mixed with water over heat, and then you add corn bits into it, and it just tastes, it sounds gross, it does, but you cannot knock it till you try it. It actually is so sweet, so creamy, so good. You need to try it. It's another thing a lot of people have to try in El Salvador. They don't try it because it's weird and It just looks yellow. It's good. And then charamuscas is something I grew up with. It's basically fruit juices, liquid, like liquid fruit juices. Okay, liquid, liquidized fruit. It's not like your juice in a plastic bottle. It's like liquidized juice, liquidized fruit put into a plastic bag and frozen. It's basically a popsicle, but it's in a bag. Something about the bag just makes it more fun. And if you want to make another charamusca from one of the drinks, you make it with horchata. Charamusca horchata is so good for some reason. It's just frozen. I don't know like why I'm like not calling it a popsicle, but it's just not. It's not how I grew up. It's called a charamusca. So good, love it. And then when you go to our carnivals or our fairs or our celebrations, look out for the papas locas person. It's always someone with a cart with oil in it, and then in there are French fries. I know French fries are basic, but on the inside they're like soft, and on the outside they have a crunch, and they're always like a little burnt on the corners. Ugh, so good. And obviously the toppings are kind of like, oh my god, what makes them crazy? No, it's just ketchup and mayo. But then they sprinkle the Salvadorian cheese, and Salvadorian cheese is so good. I keep saying so good to everything, but it's true. It's just so good. But if you do go to El Salvador, I personally would recommend. Um, I forgot the name of the cheese. It's a soft texture cheese. Oh, guajada. That's the name of it. It's called guajada cheese. When you go, you gotta fast for that. It's a little more like squishy, but it's just good, and I feel like it dissolves a lot better. But the hard cheese that goes on the fries are good too. But guajada is so much better. So much better. But yeah, those are the papas locas. Get those two. Okay, so El Paraíso Chalatenango. This is a municipio in Chalatenango. This is where my mom and my aunt were born. This is where my mama Lela is, my tío Adan is, my tío. Basically, all my tíos and my cousins make up this town. And it's basically where I learned to walk and eat and run and cry. This is where I grew up. My family has always owned land in this town. We've owned land there since my grandma crossed the border here. So it's always been this prison wall piece of land. Like, I'm not kidding. There are walls of cement with barbed wire around it and a portón, which is like a big metal door you gotta push to get in. But that's how I grew up. But then inside, we have the most beautiful trees, fruit plants. We got chickens. We got a cat. We had a dog. I don't know where it went. And we have birds and parrots, and it's just so beautiful. Like, it's so green when the doors open up. And then you have like our house, and the houses in El Salvador aren't like the houses here. They're very Salvadorian style, and it's gorgeous. Like, I wish I had pictures of my house, but I don't be taking pictures of my house because I just go home. Like, that's like my second. That is my home. That's just my house. It's not somewhere I'm just like, oh my god, a hotel. Kick, kick. No, it's my house. So I grew up here. I literally have my name carved into all the trees, and it's so. I just like it's so amazing thinking about it that this house has grown with me. Like, I've remembered this house for basically 21 years now. It's been in my life for 21 years, but it's halfway across the world. That's what's amazing about it. It stayed in my family all these years. And even now, it got renovated. We ended up building a whole second part of the house. And even now, it's still, wow, like, I have a designated room over there. I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic, but love my house. Best part about it. And another best part is we live close to the river. When I tell you close to the river, I mean you take a right, you take a left, you go down. It's right there. Perfect. And my house is basically where the people who owned land near me were the people who grew crops. So all around me are like cornfields and what's that thing called? Sugarcane trees are all around me. And then it's just my house. It's incredible because we were like the first people to buy land out there and not make crops. We made a house instead. But slowly there are new houses coming in. But it's always, we were the first people there. We are the OGs. And like another best part about El Paraíso is we have one of the natural reserves, 1 out of 3 of the natural reserves in El Salvador. So I don't have to go far to go to our natural reserve. It's right there. I can just go. It's close by. And another thing about El Paraíso is we actually have 2 rivers that flow in our community. And I'm pretty sure the one I swim in is El Rio Grande, which is on this. Okay, this is like the town. There's one side where the river is, and there's another river on this side. But it's a lot further in, so you have to drive deeper into the town. Whereas me, I'm on like one end, where you just drive all the way straight through town, all the way to that end. But I don't go the opposite. Like we're the east when you go into El Salvador, and the west is a whole other part I've never been to, but I know it exists. And then we actually have our own clinic in like the town. So these clinics in El Salvador, obviously it's a random thing to put in, but it's new to me because I recently used it, and turns out that at these clinics you don't pay for treatment. You don't pay for the medication you get. You don't pay for anything. You just go and you get aided and then you leave. But you also get the medication handed to you right there with no fee to you at all, which I personally find incredible because free healthcare seems to be scarce in the U.S., which makes no sense because if a third world country can do it, why can't a country like this do it? You know, just a question, So for some reason on this one, it's not letting me record and it's not saving. So I'm gonna see if this one saves since it's just my voice. But why is it my favorite? Well, I was exposed to the culture, and I think that's the most beautiful part of El Salvador is its culture and its people. I was exposed to the respect to have on other people when meeting them. Like it's always good to give people like the benefit of the doubt. It's always good to be welcoming and kind, and I feel like that's one thing I took away. I don't always practice it because in the U.S., the people just tend to be very different than Salvadorians, but in El Salvador, it never changes. These people will welcome you and love you and care for you, even if they just met you. They will treat you like they've known you for years, and it's infectious. The way it rubs off on you is incredible. And overall, I love the music, the sun. I just feel like the sun just gives you so much vitamin D that like you're just so happy and like ready for the world in this place. And I feel like the bright colors and the food just add to that experience of like being exposed to just an overall like this amazing feeling of like pure joy and happiness. I feel like that's just the best way to describe El Salvador. It's perfect. I love it. And then obviously I talked about it. The food, amazing. You are going to not be upset. It's divine. So good. The vendors, I promise you, pull over on that road and buy from those fruit stands because you are benefiting yourself with the freshest and most delectable fruits and chips and nuts and whatever they're selling. But you're also benefiting the people that are selling that because these people will be at the side of the road at 6 in the morning till like maybe 8 at night selling stuff, and maybe only like 3 cars pull over. But I promise you, if you're one of those cars, you will like bless them. And I feel like that's the most important part when it comes to these vendors is blessing them. And yeah, I just think that's very important to go over. And then the next thing is the natural reserves, cenotes and cascadas. I feel like natural reserves in El Salvador, there are 3. Oh wait, hold up. The natural reserves, they're beautiful and everything. If you do go to El Salvador, and I hope y'all do, go to Lago de Coantepeque. That is one of the bodies of waters that were created from a volcanic explosion. It is so beautiful. The water is turquoise. Turquoise! And as far as I know, I don't think there's any animals in there besides fish. But oh my god, it is so beautiful, and it's gorgeous. It's something you have to experience if you go. And then the cenotes, which are like the civilizations of tribes before El Salvador was El Salvador. And I just think it's so beautiful to go and see what civilization was like before and learn about their history, so you can see. So for some reason on this one, it's not letting me record and it's not saving. So I'm gonna see if this one saves since it's just my phone. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Now for my Q&A portion of my presentation, I took the extra step and I had my friends record questions for me so I can answer them to make this as like realistic as possible that I'm doing this presentation in front of people. So here is my first friend's question.
One of the biggest present, if not the biggest present in the entire world. Do you think the conditions he has these prisoners in humane? And do you think this justifies or even makes up for the amount of things they have done to the country?
Okay, so her question has to do with if I think the conditions that the prisoners are in the new prison in El Salvador are inhumane or humane. And the second part was, do I think that this prison measures up to what they did and like how they're being handled measures up to what they did? So for the first part of the question, a lot of the criticism that we've been getting from the U.S. has to be that the conditions of the prison are inhumane. But I just find it funny that the U.S. thinks they have a say in what El Salvador's doing with these gang members, because this wasn't a conversation of inhumane when our women were being raped, when our men were being murdered, when our kids were disappearing, when the bodies were in rivers, when the buses were being jumped, when people were being jumped. This was never a conversation of inhumane actions when it was crime. But now that we're putting criminals in prisons that are poor conditions, not poor conditions because it's the state of our prison. This prison has money put into it. So I just don't understand why people assume this is inhumane, because personally what they did to end up in that prison was more inhumane than the condition they're in, because they're still alive. They're still breathing. People know where they are, but there are still so many people that are missing. There are still so many dead bodies that are dead. There are people grieving and suffering from these actions. I just don't see it as inhumane. I see it as time being served. If they really wanted to see this as inhumane, they really could have just put all these gang members up against the wall and had free fire and just solved the problem like that. But they didn't. They took it the humane action of letting them live and putting them in jail. So, yeah. The second part of the question was, do I think that these conditions measure up to what they did? No. No, there's no measuring to what they did in the terrorizing of a country for centuries and years that a jail will, like, equal what they did. Like, I just don't see them being in jail similar to what they did. Because torturing and murdering and raping will never have a comparison. There's nothing to equal it. There's no justice to that, because they did it. These people are scarred, they suffered, they died, and now these people are in a jail. They have a house, not a house, they have a roof over their head, they have a metal bed, they have a bathroom, they have oxygen in their lungs, they have blood in their bodies, they're alive. So personally, I'd rather let them rot than anything else. They're fine. They know what they did. We know what they did. Now they're serving it. And that's it. There's nothing more to it. Next question. Yes. What inspires them to better the government? So, for Bukele to better the government, I feel like the inspiration came from personal knowledge or like living it. I feel like he was around when everything was happening, and he actually is a part of the people. He was a part of the people before he became the leader of the people. And by doing that, he had firsthand experience in all the situations. So he came into this and said, well, I have to be for the people if no one else was going to be for the people. So he took that, and his inspiration was, well, I don't want my people being afraid anymore. I want my people to live, and what they're doing now isn't living. It's struggling and barely making it through. So his inspiration was making sure that El Salvador became a safe and better place. Ooh, I gotta say. Excuse me. So yeah, I feel like that's what his inspiration was, to very much bring El Salvador out of the dark ages and to give lives to people that are worth living, not living in terror or fear. So I feel like that's what the inspiration. Here's my works cited page. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving. Goodbye.